Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my Would You Read It Challenge video for August 2025. I have finally caught up with my monthly goal of posting these videos. That is, if I post today, which is the last day of August. But anyway, the Would You Read It Challenge was started by Et2 Brody. It was a way to gather a variety of books by whatever metrics you'd like, read the first sentence of each book, and then, present them to your audience, and then ask your audience if they would continue with said books. And I've actually been doing this tag for a while, monthly, but I actually expanded it to the first few paragraphs or page of the book because I thought that would be a little fairer to, the story and getting a gist of it. And I have been using old ballads of the BookTube Prize for Fiction as, my base of the books I'm choosing from. So the BookTube Prize was started by Robert Sheard in 2019 as a way for the literary bookdernet to come together and judge the best of U.S. published literary fiction and nonfiction published in English in the U.S. the year before. So we are actually actually near the end of the 2025 BookTube Prize. We're in the final of 4 rounds, the finals, and I am an official judge for nonfiction, and I can't talk about any of those books as we're officially judging them and ranking them so that we don't influence each other. But I can talk about ballads from yesteryear, so that's why I decided to go back to our large backlog of fiction, because I thought that'd be fun. Specifically, I'm, taking into account the entire long list for each year in fiction, which would be 8 ballots of what we call the Octofinals round. And so now I am up to 2022 of the BookTube Prize, and I'm looking at the ballot for fiction Group F. And of these 6 books on the ballot, I have read one of them. I think I even read it before the prize for myself, and I think I might have enjoyed it more than anyone who was reading it for the prize. I'm pretty sure this book did not advance to the next round. And then, of course, there's the other 5 books that I haven't read at all, except now I've, accumulated their first pages. And we're going to read them together, and then I'll share my thoughts and invite yours. So, without further ado, starting with Book 1. Chapter 1. It didn't matter where I lived, Mid-City, Mid-Wilshire, or Miracle Mile. It didn't matter where I worked. One Hollywood bullshit factory was equal to any other. All that mattered was what I ate, when I ate, and how I ate it. Every day at 7:30, my alarm went off. I'd remove the night-soaked piece of nicotine gum from my mouth, put it on the nightstand, and replace it with a fresh piece. I'd begun smoking at 16 and was never without a cigarette. But when I started working at the talent management office, I was no longer able to smoke all day. I switched over to nicotine gum, which provided me with a way to chew my cigarettes and always be indulging. Now I was never without a piece of the gum. It helped me skillfully restrict my food intake, providing both a distraction for my mouth and a speedy suppressant for my appetite. I bought the gum on eBay, stale and discounted, so that I could afford it. At market prices, I would have had a $300 a week habit. After popping a fresh piece, I'd get into the shower and drink a little water from the spigot, letting it mix with the coating of the gum. I preferred the coated varieties, Fruit Chill or Mint Blast, and did not count the coating as part of my daily caloric intake. Some days I wondered how many calories the coating was adding. After the shower, I popped in another piece of gum. 2 more followed as I drove to work, heat blasting. This procession of gum was Breakfast 1. And that was from Milk Fed by Melissa Broder. Book 2. Prologue. December 1983. Grand Central Terminal, Midtown Manhattan. Stop fussing at it now. Leave it alone. But my nails found my scalp anyway, running from front to back to front again. My reward was a moment of sweet relief, followed by a familiar flood of dry, searing pain. Stop it. Stop it. I'd already learned that the more I scratched, the more it'd resemble the burn of a bad perm. A bad perm that had been stung by 50 wasps and then soused with moonshine. My small opportunity for reprieve would only come after the train started moving, when I could finally close my eyes and take comfort in the growing distance between me and New York City. Still, I continued to scrape at the itch incessantly, my attention shifting to another startling concern. We weren't moving yet. My eyes darted to the strip of train platform visible from the open doors, my mind moving faster than I'd moved through Grand Central Terminal just minutes earlier. What if someone followed me here? Slowly, carefully, I raised myself up to check. On the left side of the car were a young brunette mother and her baby, clad in matching, itchy-looking red winter coats with black velvet lapels. On the right was a gray-haired, greasy-looking man with his forehead smashed against the glass window, snoring so loudly that I could almost feel the train car shake. We were still the same four we'd been when I ducked into this car minutes earlier. And that was from The Other Black Girl by Sakaya Dahlia Harris. Book 3, Summer, 1977, July 30th. Rich. Rich nabbed at the week's mail from Lark's box and swung off the Eel Road, bumping down the muddy two-track past a pair of show toilets. Thorns squeaked against the Ford's side panels. Ferns, tall as man, scrubbed the windows. The driveway was so overgrown Rich could barely read the signs. Drive-through tree, real genuine Sasquatch, clean public restroom. The two-track dead-ended into Lark's clearing, overlooking the river. Rich pulled up alongside the Ancient International, abandoned in the front of the cabin, grass grown up through the truck's rust-eaten hood. The old hog nosing around in the weeds behind the outhouse didn't raise its head, but Lark's lazy too much stretched and moseyed over as soon as Rich popped his door. Banjo! Killer! Lark called from the porch, carved Sasquatches posted along the railing. 50 degrees, and here was Lark in a stained undershirt, gray hair and beard wild to his shoulders, rolls of toilet paper stacked in a pyramid on the parked wheelbarrow. Rich snagged the foil pan and six-pack of tab riding shotgun and climbed out. Lark sat back in his carving chair. Saturday already? How's the ship business? Rich asked, coming up the steps. Regular. Lark scraped a chip off a hunk of driftwood where a shaggy Sasquatch had emerged, like the wood had washed up with the Sasquatches already inside. And all he had to do was shave off the extra with the ease of a man taking the rind off of an orange in a single long peel. And that was from Damnation Spring by Ash Davidson. Book 4, Chapter 1, After. The child lies on the shore. All around him the beach is littered with the wreckage of a boat and the wreckage of its passengers. Shards of decking, knapsacks cleaved and gutted, bodies frozen in unnatural contortion. Dispossessed of nightfall's temporary burial, the dead ferment indecency. There's too much of spring in the day, too much light. Face down, with his arms outstretched, the child appears from a distance as though playing at flight. And so too in the bodies that surround him, though distended with seawater and hardening, there flicker the remains of some silent levitation, a severance from the laws of being. The sea is tranquil now, the storm has passed. The island, despite the debris, is calm. A pair of plump orange-necked birds, stragglers from a northbound flock, take rest on the lamppost from which hangs one end of a police cordon. In the breaks between the wailing of the sirens and the murmur of the onlookers, there can be heard singing. The species is not unique to the island, nor the island to the species, but the birds, when they stop here, change the pitch of their songs. The call is an octave higher, a sharp, throat-scraping thing. In time, a crowd gathers near the site of the shipwreck, tourists and locals alike. People watch. The eldest of them, an arthritic fisherman driven in recent years by plummeting cherub fish stocks to the kitchen work of a nearby resort, says it's never been like this before on the island. Other locals nod, because even though the history of this place is of violent endings, of galleys flipped over the axis of their oars, and fishing skiffs tangled in their own netting, and once, during the war, an empty Higgins lander sheared to ribbons by shrapnel, the old man is still, in his own way, right. These are foreign dead. And that was from What Strange Paradise by Omar El-Akkad. Book 5. Man as the Measure of All Things, 1944. Somewhere in the Tuscan hills, two English spinsters, Evelyn Skinner and a Margaret someone, were eating a late lunch on the terrace of a modest albergo. It was the 2nd of August, a beautiful summer's day if only you could forget there was a war on. One sat in shade, the other in light, due to the angle of the sun and the vine-strewn trellis overhead. They were served a reduced menu, but celebrated the Allied advance with large glasses of Chianti. Overhead, a low-flying bomber cast them momentarily in shadow. They picked up their binoculars and studied the markings. Ours, they said, and waved. This rabbit's delicious, said Evelyn, and she caught the eye of the proprietor, who was smoking by the doorway. She said, Coniglio, buonissimo, signore. The signore put his cigarette in his mouth and raised his arm, part salute, part wave, one couldn't be sure. Do you think he's a fascist? Said Margaret quietly. No, I don't think so, said Evelyn, although Italians are quite indecisive politically. Always have been. I heard they're shooting them now, the fascists. Everyone's shooting everyone, said Evelyn. A shell screamed on their right and exploded on a distant hill, uprooting a cluster of small cypress trees. One of ours, said Margaret, as she held onto the table to protect her camera and wineglass from the shock waves. And that was from Still Life by Sarah Winman. And finally, Book 6. 1. A woman sat in a hotel bar watching the door. Her appearance was neat and tidy, white blouse, fair hair tucked behind her ears. She glanced at the screen of her phone, on which was displayed a messaging interface, and then looked back at the door again. It was late March, the bar was quiet, and outside the window to her right the sun was beginning to set over the Atlantic. It was 4 minutes past 7, and then 5, 6 minutes past. Briefly, and with no perceptible interest, she examined her fingernails. At 8 minutes past 7, a man entered through the door. He was slight and dark-haired, with a narrow face. He looked around, scanning the faces of the other patrons, and then took out his phone and checked the screen. The woman at the window noticed him, but beyond watching him, made no additional effort to try and catch his attention. They appeared to be about the same age, in their late 20s or early 30s. She let him stand there until he saw her and came over. Are you Alice? He said. That's me, she replied. Yeah, I'm Felix. Sorry I'm late. In a gentle tone, she replied, That's all right. He asked her what she wanted to drink and then went to the bar to order. The waitress asked how he was getting on, and he answered, Good, yeah, yourself? He ordered a vodka tonic and a pint of lager. Rather than carrying the bottle of tonic back to the table, he emptied it into the glass with a quick and practiced movement of the wrist. The woman at the table tapped her fingers on a beer mat, waiting. Her outward attitude had become more alert and lively since the man had entered the room. She looked outside now at the sunset as if it was interest to her, though she hadn't paid any attention to it before. And the man returned and put the drinks down. A drop of lager spilled over, and she watched its rapid progress down the side of his glass. And that was from Beautiful World, Where Are You? By Sally Rooney. Okay, well, starting with the first book, Milk-Fed, that's the one I actually read. I think I was taken with it a lot. I was taken by the characterization of this, like, highly neurotic character who has, like, put her entire life and soul into a crazy and likely unhealthy diet regimen. This, of course, is our setup about, what her diet and her life looks like now, where she's just so hyper-regimented about squelching her appetite with nicotine gum and that sort of thing. But then she will be challenged in the future by a relationship with, I believe, a proprietor of an ice cream store who starts to feed her a bit. But this main character does keep a bit of her, like, obsessive personality as well. And very unlikable characters, I think, and I think it comes down to having the stomach, no pun intended, for this sort of thing. But I really found it a really interesting study overall. Then we get into book 2, which was The Other Black Girl, and I might be being biased by what I read before that, but I kind of am seeing this section as being neurotic as well, this narrator being neurotic as well. I don't know if I would have, seen her behavior differently if I didn't go in with that, previous book in my head, but that's what's in my head when I'm thinking about she's really kind of desperate to get out of the city every day and has this like routine she has to follow, and when things go off the routine, things are in trouble. So that's kind of what I took from this, and I like the tension of it, and the details of the environment and the people around her. I don't think it has much to do with what I understand the book to be about later, which I think also was turned into like a movie, I believe. But I thought it was an interesting introduction to a character. Then we have book 3, Damnation Spring, which might be my favorite even. I mean, it's very low key, and the characters don't seem nearly as neurotic, although maybe they are. They live in a weird place. I think I enjoyed all of the references to like this overdone tourist attraction with the Sasquatches. That's at least how it seemed to me. I mean, they're advertising it, or at least the roadway is advertising it. And we have these two dogs with two very different names of Banjo and Killer, and we have like these, it seems like two old friends meeting up. And there's some funny humor, I think, in it where we're talking about the shit business being regular, and I'll just keep my scatological, associations to myself. But I just thought it was well done in terms of, setting up the scene and the characters. Then we get to book 4, What Strange Paradise. I think I went a little overboard. This is probably my longest section that I did. I was like trying to make things kind of close to 250 words, I think, and didn't want to be much below it. And then this last paragraph was really long and yada yada. I think this got to 315 words. But anyway, I think, it gives a large swath, maybe a larger swath than any of the others, about what's happening. We start with this travesty of this shipwreck, and there's all of this just haunting imagery, especially of a child's body and of these birds that are keeping a strange vigil, and perhaps, I don't know if it's on the nose. Maybe I'm going too far with that one. It's not on the nose to point out that the birds are also not native to this this island. It's actually probably a nice bit of cadence. And then we get to the actual, locals and their, reaction to this, which seems to perhaps hint at the politics of, seeing these foreigners who washed up on the shore as other. So definitely this is the most overtly political book I think we're getting into, where you can draw the inference that we're talking about people who are, taking desperate measures to try to escape to from wherever they came from to hopefully a safer location if they can get there. But we're starting out with the reality that some of them don't, and tragically, and I assume we'll go from there into these politics and following, survivors and that sort of thing. Although it was interesting, in that book they mentioned the war as in, I guess, the natives' association with, shipwrecks, and I'm assuming, I always tend to assume World War II, and then that is what the setting is of the next book, book 5, with Still Life, where these two English spinsters are in Italy, and it's so surreal and just unnervingly humorous in its way. I don't know, I'm feeling in a humorous mood, I guess. But unnervingly humorous because they're literally in a war zone where, bombers are dropping, like, within earshot and, like, lighting up the reality around them, and it feels like a pretense that they can actually just enjoy a nice lunch on a terrace, and when they're so close to danger. But I guess that's what people do, and that's, I guess, the feeling I got out of this, is that they're carving their reality and their peace where they can in these very uncertain times. They're not even in a quite safe location, it feels like. I mean, because Italy's, place in the war was so uneven because, of Mussolini and the fascism and their, alliance with Germany that then went to pot. But, so yeah, I mean, in terms of historical fiction, I think this is pretty well tread ground where a lot of readers, I think, would kind of understand the associations pretty quickly because, having that backing in World War II. And then finally we have book 6, Beautiful World, Where Are You? And, I thought it was all right, but I think I was a little bit distant from this one, with, and I guess it was on purpose because Sally Rooney doesn't even give us the names of her characters. She's introducing them to us absolutely as strangers. Like, we have the woman waiting for the man and getting the drinks, which takes a fair amount of time. I think a little too much time, frankly, spent on getting the drinks. But if I'm going to quibble about something about this book and the previous book, I really hate that these authors don't use quotation marks for speech. Anyway, but so that's just me, I guess, nitpicking. I mean, I feel like there's some promise. I guess I don't know for sure how these people know each other. I mean, they know each other well enough to recognize each other on sight. Otherwise, I have, no idea who they are to each other or why they're meeting. And it would have been nice to focus a little more on that than about, the lager going down the wine glass, or maybe just that detail rather than the entire conversation at the bar. So anyway, that's my nitpick about this one. And there we have it. But have you read any of these books? I'd love to hear your thoughts about them, or if you have different thoughts about Milk-Fed, probably you do, than I did. Or if any of these books now stand out to you and interest you to put on your TBRs, let me know. And that about covers it for me now, and for more information about the books, I will leave their Goodreads links down below, as well as my written review for Milk-Fed. I will be back on this channel officially in September to do my August book haul. Hopefully it'll be coming up relatively quickly. It's going to be a short and sweet little video for that, so stay tuned. And in the meantime, thanks so much for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time.